So what we're going to be doing today is some extra graphing practice. And this is going to be a little different because you're going to be doing this and you're going to be constantly pausing and doing pieces and then hitting play again to check to make sure you're correct. So I'm not going to have the normal, pause right now thing on the screen because it would be taking up too much of the screen. And make sure as you go you fill out everything on the paper. Each step is important to us and we would have to have you start over if you're unable to do that. Okay, so first thing, we want to just kind of review some stuff. So we're going to remember that for any form of graphing, we only need two basic things. We need slope and we need y-intercept. The y-intercept is the first one we're going to get, and we call it the starting point. So when we say starting at, and that's the first point you're going to place on the graph, and you're going to place it on the up and down line every single time. So if my y-intercept is 6, I'm going to place a dot at 6 on the y-intercept, which is the up and down line. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to try just a few, and you can see on there. Now notice you should have filled out the y-intercept part and the slope part. So you can go ahead and pause the video as you go, or you can go back right now and fill it out. But I do want you to fill those things out and just pause the video anytime you need to when I ask you to do stuff. So first one we're going to do together. So for example, as you can see, I have the same graph as you guys have in the far left example. And I'm going to give you the y-intercept is 0, -3, and the slope is 1/2. So you're going to be given after this, you're going to be given slope and y-intercept, and you're just going to have to graph the line given that information. So think about what the first thing you're going to do is. Okay, remember we talked about the y-intercept is the very first point we place, and it's always in the up and down line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of look on here, and I'm going to try to find that -3. So when I look, I've got -2, excuse me, -2 and -4. So what that would mean is that -3 would have to be right in the middle of those two. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to place my point right there at -3. So make sure you've done that on your paper. Remember, hit pause anytime you need to. Okay, now what I want you to do next is I want you to go ahead and try to graph that next slope. So what the slope does is it gives us the next point on our line and every point after that. Okay, it's like saying I'm going to walk up 1 to the right 2. Why to the right? Because this is a positive 1/2. So remember, we're always going to move up and we're going to move right. So what you should end up with is a point right there. Notice that I went up 1 and then right 2. And I'm going to repeat that process now as many times as I can. Okay, and all of those little spots are going to be where I make my points. You don't have to make the little steps looking thing, but you do need to place a point at every point that you can on the graph. So from there, I'm going to place every other point that I possibly can. And that just allows you to kind of practice slope with the rise over run, and then it also allows you to go ahead and get to this point. Before you go ahead and draw your line, I want you to think to yourself, will that line match up with what I think I should have? 1/2 tells me two things. Okay, it tells me first that it should be uphill, which means it should look like a line that looks like that, something like that. And it does. If I graph those points, my line's going to go uphill. Secondly, what I see is that the line is more flat. A fraction should be more of a flat line versus a line that's sort of like straight up and down, which would be a whole number like 3 or a 4 or a 5 or a 6. That would be more straight up and down. So those things so far match up with what I'm expecting, which is good. So now I'm going to go ahead and connect my line. If I don't, it's a lot easier to erase a couple points than it is to go ahead and erase a whole line. So each time you're going to start off with your y-intercept, you're going to pause it after that, then we're going to check that. Then we're going to pause it then we're going to draw our slope. After 1 point, we're going to pause it and check that we're correct because we want to double check that our line is going to be going the right direction. If it takes 2 or 3 points to do that, great. But if we can get it on 1 point, that's the best time to check it. Using one of the blank 3 that you have next to it, the y-intercept is 1 and the slope is -2/1. So pause the video and place the y-intercept where you think it should go. All right, so if you did it correctly, it should have been right there at 0, 1. Now go ahead and place the slope being negative 2 over 1. And you should have written this on the paper, by the way. Place that next point, so pause it while you place it where you think it's going to go. Okay, if you did it correctly, it should be right there. Okay, as you can notice, that'll be a downhill line when you graph it. So now go ahead and pause it again, do the speed graphing where you place every point that you can, and connect them with the line, and we'll check your entire answer. All right, so these are the points that you're going to place. All right, and draw a line through them. Okay, each time you complete a line, just double check that everything's correct. And each time you finish a section, you're going to call me over. So when you finish all 4 of these, you can call me over to show me that you've done it. Okay, next one to try on your own. Y-intercept is 0, negative 7, and slope is 4 over 1. So go ahead and pause the video and do the y-intercept. Okay, so you should have placed it at negative 7 down there. And now go ahead and place the first point using a slope of positive 4 over 1. Okay, the point should have been right there. Okay, so up 4, right 1. Okay, now extend that by doing the speed graphing. All right, and these are the points you should get. And draw your line. Okay, the last one for you to try is with a y-intercept of 0, 4 and a slope of negative 2 over 3. So start off with the y-intercept. Okay, the y-intercept should end up right there at 4. Now go ahead and plot your first point using the slope. Okay, up 2 and left 3 because it's negative. Double check that your line is downhill, which it is. If it's incorrect, fix it. And then pause it while you do the speed graphing. Hit play when you're done to double check your final answer. Okay, speed graphing should look like this. And a line's drawn through it. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look back at our 2 forms. So as you can see, it's all on the paper for you already, so we're just going to review it. So in y-intercept, it's y equals mx plus b. And we have the 2 pieces of information. M, all we have to do is look right in front of the x, and that'll get us our piece of information we need for the slope. And our b is the y-intercept, and all we have to do for that is look to the right, and don't forget that you need to include this plus or minus sign that's right there. That needs to be included in your answer. For standard form, it's written as ax plus by equals c. For the slope, we take the opposite of a over b. So we take the opposite of whatever a is and divide it by whatever b is. The y-intercept, we cover up the a and the x like that, and whatever's left over, we solve that one-step equation by dividing by b. All right, so we're going to try some examples. What you're going to do is you're going to start off with the problem, and the first thing you're going to do on your paper is you're going to decide whether it's slope-intercept or standard form. So go ahead and pause the video and decide. Okay, so this one is slope-intercept form. You can tell because it's y equals. Now what we're going to do is we're going to identify the y-intercept, which is 0, 4. Again, we look just to the right. And then we're going to identify our slope after that. So we're going to plot that point, 0, 4. Now we're going to look at our slope. Remember the slope on this one, you just take the number directly in front of x. So you take the number right there, which is 6 over 1. So go ahead and plot that first point on there by going up 6 and right 1, and then repeating that with speed graphing. Okay, and we did the first example together, but you guys are going to do the rest after this on your own. So first thing you're going to do is decide if it's slope-intercept, find the y-intercept and plot that point, find the slope, and do your first point, and then speed graph. So make sure that your graph matches exactly what you see on my paper. If you have to pause it, go ahead and do that. Okay, now that that's done, we're going to move on to the first example. So here's your first example. Go ahead and write it on the paper. Decide if it's standard form or slope-intercept. It is standard form. You can tell because ax and by, so a is negative 12 and b is negative 4. We'll start off with the y-intercept. So remember, for the y-intercept, we need to cover up the x like this. So go ahead and pause the video, finish that problem really quick, and plot the point on the line. Okay, you're going to end up with y equals -6, so the point is 0, -6. And you're going to plot that point on the line. Hey, I'm trying to make... Okay, so next we're going to go ahead and we're going to figure out the slope. So remember, in standard form, that means we're going to have to do opposite of a over b. So pause the video and try to find that. All right, so the slope should be opposite of a, which is +12, over b, which is -4. When you simplify that, you're going to get -3/1. So now go ahead and plot that first point. Pause it while you do that. Okay, so we're going to go up 3 and left 1. Now go ahead and speed graph. Pause the video while you do that. All right, so these are the points that you should have came up with. And drawing your line. So remember, as we go through this, if you have any questions, this is why we did this in class, so you can have an opportunity to call us over. All right, the next equation, write it down. Decide first if it's slope or y-intercept, and pause the video while you do those two things. Okay, it is in fact slope-intercept form. So we're going to go ahead and start off by finding our y-intercept. Pause the video while you decide on that and plot the point. Okay, so remember, you'll look just to the right, so it should be 0, 3, and the point should be right there. All right, now go ahead and decide on the slope. Okay, if done correctly, it should be 3/4. So now go ahead and plot your first point. So remember, this means you go up 3 and to the right 4, so your first point should be right there. Now go ahead and speed graph. All right, and that's the result you should end up with. Okay, next example, y equals x minus 2. Again, decide if it's slope-intercept. It is slope-intercept, of course. All right, so we're going to go ahead and go from there. Start off by finding the y-intercept and plotting the point. Okay, the point is 0, -2 because you just look to the right of x, and the point gets plotted right there. Okay, now go ahead and take a second to find the slope and plot your first point. Okay, well, if you had any trouble, the slope here is 1/1 because there's a hidden 1. So take a second, pause it if you need to now graph it. Okay, your first point should have been up 1, right 1. Now go ahead and speed graph. All right, and these are the results you'll get. This one has a lot of points on it, I know, but it's good practice, and it'll make sure that your line is totally, completely straight. Even for me making this video, it helped me make a nice straight line using these points, because then it was very easy to make sure the line went directly through the center of all the points like it was supposed to. All right, another example. You may have to flip to the back here. 3x plus 2y equals 12. Decide if it's slope-intercept or not. Okay, it is actually standard form because x and y are on the same side of the equal sign. So now we're going to start off with our y-intercept. So pause it, see if you can remember how to do this. Okay, so if you couldn't remember, the first step is to cross off the 3x. So maybe pause it now and finish it. So your final answer should be 0, 6. Plotting that point. Now we need to figure out our slope. Remember, slope is opposite of a over b, so pause the video while you figure that out. Okay, so it should be negative 3 over 2. The opposite of 3 is negative 3. Now go ahead and simplify if you can. In this case, you cannot, of course, because there's no numbers to simplify and only one negative sign. Now go ahead and plot that first point on the graph. Okay, now hopefully you went up 3 and left 2. That's a big mistake here. A lot of people still graph it as a positive. Remember, you want a downhill line. Now go ahead and speed graph. There shouldn't be too many to plot. All right, and the ones you can plot are right here. If you're done correctly, it should make a nice straight line, and you'll know you've done it right. Okay, another example for you. This is, of course, standard form again, x, y on the same side. So starting off with our y-intercept, see if you can remember what to do here. Okay, the first step is to cover up the 5x and write what's left. From there, you divide by negative 5, which gives you 0, 3. So plot that point in your graph. All right, goes right there. We need to go ahead now and determine our slope. Remember, opposite of a over b. So take a second and do that. Okay, it gives you negative 5 over negative 5, which obviously simplifies quite a bit. Negative over negative makes positive, and 5 over 5 makes 1 over 1. So plot that first point. Again, up 1, right 1, and speed graph the rest of the way. And you should end up with another whole lot of points on this one as well that fit on the graph, but at least they're easy to count. And it just helps you make a nice straight line. Anywhere on the graph, you'd be able to tell me. If I said, hey, what is it at negative 9? You'd be able to say, oh, it's at negative 6 for the y, just quickly by looking. Okay, another example for you. Decide if it's slope-intercept or standard form. Okay, it is slope-intercept form. Why? Because of the y by itself. Determine the y-intercept by this problem. The y-intercept is negative 6. Remember, we look to the right of the x. Plot that point on the graph right there. So now identify your slope and plot that first point if you can. If not, wait and plot the point after we discuss the slope. Okay, the slope is negative 1 over 5. Again, we look just to the left of the x. And you can pause it if you want to. Otherwise, we're going to go up 1 and left 5. Be careful that you did go left. Once you have that correct, speed graph the rest. And you'll end up with this right here. Okay, once again, write down your equation. This is in standard form. Why? Because x and y are together. See if you can remember how to find the y-intercept. Okay, it occurs from covering up the x. Solving that, we're going to end up with y equals negative 1. So go ahead and plot that point. Okay, it ends up right there. We're going to then next discover our slope. Remember, it's opposite of a over b. Opposite a over b gives me negative 2 over negative 10, because don't forget that minus sign in front of the 10. Negative over negative turns into a positive, and 2 over 10 turns into 1 over 5. All right, so go ahead and plot your first point. Make sure you know that part, do that part correctly. Okay, if done correctly, it should be right there. So now speed graph the rest of it. And you should end up with this right here. Notice it goes uphill, and our slope was a positive 1 over 5, and a very flat line, which helps as well. Okay, I believe this is the last one. So go ahead and start off by determining if it's slope, intercept, or standard. Okay, it is in fact slope, intercept. So our y-intercept might be a little tricky on this one. Be careful. Okay, it is in fact 0, 0. Because there is no number there, but remember that's the same as saying there's a plus 0 right there. So plotting that point, it ends up right at the origin. So now go ahead and determine the slope. Okay, remember whole numbers need to be written as fractions, so it's -3/1. So plot the first point. Done correctly, it should go there. Remember, it's up and left because it's a negative. Now speed graph the rest of it. Okay, so since you finished the graph, make sure you have shown this completed assignment to me or Miss Allen. If you don't complete it all, then obviously you wouldn't get to this part of the video, so I guess it's not that important. And if you do finish early, see us for what to do next.